Toto Wolff joked he's closer to putting George Russell in the Renault Clio Cup than a Mercedes Formula 1 car after his massive crash with Valtteri Bottas at Imola, but Wolff's disapproval was completely serious. Russell and Bottas had a frightening accident in the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix when Williams driver and Mercedes protege Russell lost control and speared into the side of Bottas at high speed, trying to pass him around the outside on the approach to the Tamburello chicane. The aftermath featured two furious drivers, two massively damaged cars, and a pretty peeved Mercedes team boss who made his disapproval of Russell's actions very clear. So what happened? Why did it upset Mercedes? What was Bottas even doing being overtaken by Williams in the first place? And how might all this impact Mercedes' driver choice for 2022? We'll answer all of that for you here, so give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already if you think we do a good job at doing so. On the approach to Tamburello, shortly after the halfway mark of a race that started in wet conditions, Russell got a great run on Bottas with the DRS activated. He moved to the right of the Mercedes for the final part of the run to the chicane, but seemed to dip his right rear slick tyre onto the still wet grass, and his car snapped violently to the left into Bottas, wiping them both out in dramatic fashion. Both drivers were angry after the high-speed crash, with Russell going out of his way to remonstrate against Bottas and getting shown the middle finger for his trouble. No action was taken on the accident by the stewards, as they found that at no time did either car manoeuvre erratically, that Russell's spin was the result of the conditions and having the DRS activated, and therefore they concluded it was a racing incident. But Russell, who is a serious candidate for a Mercedes drive next season, was adamant that Bottas could have avoided it. He felt he'd been squeezed unnecessarily towards the grass and said afterwards that perhaps if it was another driver, he wouldn't have done that. Wolff and Bottas made their thoughts on that quite clear. Wolff called it bullshit, and when Russell's comments were put to Bottas, the Finn briefly looked confused and joked, "Sorry, I lost my aluminium foil hat somewhere, it's quite a theory." It capped a miserable weekend for Bottas, who many, including Wolff, have pointed out shouldn't have been in a position to be attacked by a Williams in the first place. The accident came shortly after Bottas had been lapped by race leader Max Verstappen and overtaken by Aston Martin driver Lance Stroll for 8th place. Had Mercedes teammate Lewis Hamilton not dropped it into the Tosa gravel going offline to lap Russell in his pursuit of Verstappen, he'd have lapped Bottas as well, with only half the race completed. Bottas was in the pack to begin with because he couldn't get his tyres to work properly in qualifying, so while Hamilton claimed a surprise pole position, Bottas only started 8th. He never looked like hauling himself out of the midfield, finding himself completely stuck early on while everyone was on intermediate tyres. And because he'd stopped to switch to dry tyres a lap later than Stroll and Russell, he couldn't get the mediums to work as quickly and came under attack. So the same factor that compromised his race to begin with also played a key role in how it ended. But if this was a racing incident, why was Wolff annoyed? He joked afterwards that he teases Russell by saying if he does a good job, Russell can be in a Mercedes, and if not, he's doing the Renault Clio Cup. And after that crash, Wolff said he's closer to driving a Clio than a Mercedes F1 car. Amusing as it is to consider Russell being downgraded so severely that he wouldn't even land a drive in one of Mercedes' entry-level offerings like GT4, Russell's not really going to be turfed out to tin top racing. But while that particular dig was light-hearted, Wolff's disapproval was sincere. It was clear when he spoke to us after the race that he felt Russell was mainly responsible, and Bottas indicated that Wolff had told him as much when they spoke briefly as well. Part of Wolff's frustration was born from the belief that Russell should have handled the situation differently considering it was against a Mercedes, especially as it was a risky move. Wolff said the crash also has serious implications for Mercedes, as it means an extensive and expensive rebuild job at a time the team has worked very hard to cut costs to meet the new for 2021 budget cap. Russell felt he wasn't taking any big risk, saying the move was absolutely on, but Wolff saw it differently. He said Russell should never have attempted the pass considering the track was still drying, especially as it meant taking a risk against a Mercedes. Wolff said that in any driver's development, for a young driver you must never lose this global perspective, so lots to learn for him. Wolff planned to speak to Russell after the race to make his point, which will likely be to ram home the disappointment that Russell played such a key role in destroying one of Mercedes' cars and costing it points in the World Championship. He also said he didn't want Russell to try to prove anything to Mercedes, as that's something Bottas has never done, hinting that Wolff might be concerned Russell wanted to make some kind of statement by passing Bottas. It may seem unrealistic or even unfair to expect Russell to drive differently against a Mercedes when he's racing for another team, and Russell said it's not even crossed his mind. In the moment, Russell simply saw this as a personal fight to take on, but that's where Wolff's call for a global perspective comes in. He believes it was wrong that Russell lost himself in that short-term focus of seeing a place up for grabs in his own race, and whether Russell agrees or not, Wolff's opinion does matter. We'd be getting carried away if we thought the crash would have a lasting impact on Russell's reputation at Mercedes or significantly impact his chance of landing a 2021 drive with the team. For what it's worth, Russell insists it's not going to harm his relationship with Mercedes at all and says he and Bottas will clear the air. But it would be naive to think Russell hasn't given himself a bit of damage to repair, especially if he resists ceding to Wolff's belief that he should fight a Mercedes differently to other cars. Immediately after the race and later on Sunday evening, it was clear Russell emphatically believed he was in the right. Though he slightly softened his stance on Bottas, admitting that Bottas did nothing against the rules, he was still clearly of the opinion that Bottas could and should have acted differently. Doubling down on his insistence he was right to make a move that Wolff has condemned may not be the wisest course, as Wolff might feel justified in believing that Russell's not learned his lesson. Russell also misjudged it with his comments suggesting Bottas had raced him differently given their situation, potentially vying for a 2022 Mercedes drive. Maybe he felt others, including Wolff, would also see it that way, but the fact Wolff emphatically dismissed it suggests Russell's probably overplayed that hand too. But how did you see the Russell-Bottas crash? Do you agree with Wolff that Russell should have been more careful against the Mercedes? And how do you think, if at all, it will affect Mercedes' decision on who to put in the car next year? Let us know in the comments, give this video the thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to The Race if you want to see more of what we do in the future.